Don't look at me like that, you drab little spinster. You were born to wipe noses. I was born to be a star. My sister Batya didn't even say hello. She just pushed 4 shivering, sick children into my hallway on Christmas Eve and checked her reflection in the window. Fix them before I get back, she sneered. I just need 1 hour to be me. She was wearing a fur coat worth more than my entire car, while the 2-year-old clinging to my leg was burning up with a fever. I looked at the nursing textbooks spread across my table, then back at the kids. I didn't argue. I just locked the deadbolt as she drove away. I knew right then that 1 hour was a lie. That night didn't end when the sun came up. It stretched into a decade-long shift that never seemed to clock out. I spent the next 12 years in a state of triage, patching up the holes Batya left behind with money I didn't have, and energy I couldn't spare. I had a plan before that doorbell rang. I was going to be a pediatric surgeon. I had the grades, the discipline, and the acceptance letter to a top-tier medical program. But you cannot complete a surgical residency when you have 4 traumatized children who need breakfast, packed lunches, and therapy. So, I made the first silent cut. I shredded my acceptance letter and took a job as a floor nurse. It paid less, but the hours were stable. I traded the prestige of the operating room for the necessity of being home by 6 o'clock. People tell you that sacrifice is noble. They don't tell you it is exhausting. By 25, I found my first gray hair. By 28, I had stopped dating entirely because how do you explain to a guy that you come as a package deal with 4 nieces and nephews who call you mom by accident? I was drowning in a life I hadn't chosen, constantly terrified that I was failing them. But looking back now, I realized that while I was losing my youth, I was building something unbreakable. I was becoming the parent they deserved, simply by showing up. Batya, on the other hand, showed up only in pixels. While I was holding a bucket for a vomiting 6-year-old at 3 in the morning, my phone would light up with a notification. Batya posted a photo. There she was, tanned and glowing on a yacht in Dubai, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Living my best life." #freedom. I remember staring at that screen, eyes burning from lack of sleep, smelling like sick and bleach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment, "Your son has a fever of 103, and your daughter asks why you hate her." But I never did. I just saved the photo. Then I saved the next one. And the next. I didn't know why at the time. I told myself I was keeping them for the kids, in case they ever asked. But deep down, a colder part of me was building an archive. The worst part wasn't the work. It was the silence. For the first year, the kids waited by the window every time a car drove past. They asked when mommy was coming back. They asked if she was bringing presents. I lied to them. I told them she was working, that she was traveling to make money for them. I protected her image because I thought I was protecting their hearts. But kids are smarter than we give them credit for. Somewhere around year 4, the questions changed. They stopped asking, "When is mommy coming back?" and started asking, "Why doesn't she want us?" That question is a jagged blade, and there is no good way to pull it out. I watched the light go out in my nephew's eyes when a birthday card didn't arrive. I held my niece while she cried over a Mother's Day craft she had nobody to send to. I absorbed their pain like a sponge, taking it into myself so it wouldn't poison them. And every time I wiped a tear, my resentment toward Batya hardened into something like concrete. She wasn't just a sister who made a mistake. She was a ghost who haunted her own children, leaving me to exorcise the house every single day. The breaking point wasn't a scream. It was a funeral. 2 years ago, our grandmother passed away. She was the matriarch who held the family together, the only one who ever sent birthday checks for the kids. Batya did not show up. She claimed she was too distraught to fly back from Milan. Instead, she sent flowers. A wreath so massive and obnoxious that it physically blocked the view of the open casket. The priest had to stop the service to move it aside. I sat in the front pew, holding 4 crying children, staring at those aggressive lilies. That was the moment the fog lifted. I realized Batya wasn't just selfish or flighty. She was a malignant tumor. She believed she could buy absolution with a credit card and displace grief with a spectacle. That afternoon, while the kids ate funeral sandwiches, I stopped being a waiting sister. I started being a record keeper. I stopped deleting her cruel texts. I stopped making excuses for her absence. I let the resentment calcify into something useful. Resolve. Then, last Tuesday, the doorbell rang again. It was a bright, clear morning. I was pouring cereal, the house chaotic with the morning rush. I opened the door, half expecting a package delivery. Instead, I found Batya. She stood on my porch, 12 years older but looking younger than me, preserved by expensive skincare and a life without responsibility. Behind her stood a man in a suit that fit too tightly, a lawyer. "Hello, Julia," she said. She did not hug me. She did not ask to see the children she had abandoned. She walked past me into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors I had refinished with my own hands. "We need to talk about the estate." The lawyer cleared his throat and laid it out on my coffee table. They were filing for full custody and possession of the family home. The house was worth $450,000. It was paid off. It was the only stability these kids had ever known. Batya is ready to step up, the lawyer said, his voice oily. She has healed. She wants to be a mother now. And since she is the biological parent, she has rights to the home held in the family trust. I felt the room spin. Nausea rose in my throat. But then my training kicked in. In the emergency room, you learn to look past the screaming to find the bleeding. I looked past Batya's arrogance and really studied her. She was projecting wealth, but the details told a different story. Her Chanel handbag had a deep scuff on the corner that had been hastily colored in with black Sharpie. When she opened her leather folio, a piece of paper slid out partially. I recognized the red bold font at the top. Final notice. The realization hit me like a shot of adrenaline. She wasn't here because she missed the children. She wasn't here because she had healed. She was here because she was broke. Her influencer lifestyle had collapsed, and she needed a bailout. She had heard about grandmother's trust fund, and she was here to harvest the crop I had spent 12 years keeping alive. She thought she was staring at a tired, pushover nurse. She didn't know she was staring at a woman who had been preparing for this war for 2 years. When the lawyer's car disappeared down the street, I didn't collapse. I didn't call my friends to cry. In the ER, when a patient codes, you don't scream. You assess. You stabilize. You act. I locked the front door and walked straight to the attic stairs. For 12 years, I had treated the attic like a museum of Batya's past life. I had kept her boxes sealed, telling the kids that mommy might need her things when she came back. Now, I ripped the tape off the first box with a serrated knife. It wasn't a museum anymore. It was an evidence locker. I needed proof. Not just memories, but something admissible. Something undeniable. I dug through layers of moth-eaten designer clothes and old yearbooks until my hand brushed against cold plastic. It was a phone. Not a smartphone, but an old, clunky BlackBerry Curve with a cracked screen, the one she had abandoned in her rush to leave the country. I held it up to the attic light. This was the device she had used to text me that first week, the messages I had deleted from my own phone in a fit of grief years ago. If those texts still existed, they were trapped inside this brick. I ran downstairs to the junk drawer. Everyone has one, and dug through a tangle of wires until I found it. A mini USB cable. Not micro, not C. Ancient technology. I plugged it into the wall and connected the phone. Nothing happened. I sat on the floor, staring at that dark screen, willing electricity to flow. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I was about to give up when a tiny red light blinked in the corner. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited another 20 minutes, sweating in the cold attic air, before I dared to press the power button. The screen flickered to life. The battery icon showed a single red sliver. 4%. I didn't waste a second. I navigated the stiff, sticky trackball to the message outbox. My thumb slipped, and I cursed, terrifyingly aware that this battery could die between one breath and the next. I found the thread. December 26th, 12 years ago. There it was. Keep them. They ruin my aesthetic. I'm not coming back. I didn't try to forward it. The service was long dead. I grabbed my iPhone and took 3 high-resolution photos of the screen, capturing the message, the date, and the sender ID. Just as I snapped the third picture, the BlackBerry screen went black. It was dead forever, but the ghost had already spoken. I wasn't done. I turned back to the boxes and found the heavy, fireproof safe box my grandmother had left behind. Batya knew about the money, but she had never bothered to read the paperwork. I had. I pulled out the living trust documents. I flipped past the asset list to the conditions section. Paragraph 4. Clause B. Distribution of the family trust, totaling $200,000, is contingent upon the beneficiary proving continuous, unbroken physical residency and care of the minor children. I sat back against the dusty insulation, the papers crinkling in my grip. Continuous. Unbroken. Batya had hired a lawyer because she thought this was a standard inheritance battle. She thought she could bully me with legal fees and court dates until I folded. And honestly, in a courtroom, with her high-priced shark of an attorney, she might have been able to drag this out for years, draining my savings until I had nothing left to fight with. But I realized something then, looking at her scuffed handbag in my memory. Batya was desperate. And more importantly, she was arrogant. She still saw me as the drab spinster, the passive little sister who took orders. If I fought her, she would fight back. But if I surrendered? If I played the role she expected me to play? A plan formed in my mind, cold and sharp as a scalpel. I didn't need to beat her in front of a judge. I needed to let her greed walk her right into a trap she wouldn't see until the steel jaws snapped shut. I didn't call a lawyer. I opened my laptop and typed the email that would end this. I knew exactly what Batya wanted to hear. She didn't want to fight. She wanted a surrender. She wanted to believe that her mere presence was enough to crush me, just like it had when we were teenagers. So, I gave her exactly what she expected. Batya, you win. I cannot afford the legal fees to fight you on this. The lawyer is bleeding me dry, and I just want this over with. I am ready to sign over the house, but we need to meet to settle the outstanding household expenses first. Please, let us keep this out of court. I hit send and waited. The response came 12 minutes later. It wasn't an email, it was a text. Finally. I knew you would see reason. I will bring the transfer papers. Don't waste my time. I found out later that within the hour, she had fired her expensive suit of a lawyer. She told him she had handled it herself and didn't want to pay for another hour of his time. It was exactly as I had calculated. Her arrogance was the lock, and her desperation for money was the key. She thought she was saving $300 an hour. In reality, she was walking into the slaughterhouse alone. We agreed to meet at a neutral location. Not a coffee shop, not my house. I chose the office of Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson wasn't just a notary. He was the estate attorney who had drafted my grandmother's trust years ago. He was a man of few words and absolute precision, the kind of person who viewed a contract like a religious text. He knew exactly what was about to happen. I arrived 30 minutes early. The conference room was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. A long mahogany table stretched between us, shining under the recessed lighting. It felt less like a meeting room and more like an operating theater. Mr. Henderson nodded to me from the head of the table but didn't speak. He simply adjusted his glasses and opened his ledger. I sat down and laid out my weapons. On the left, I placed a thick, bound document, itemized cost of child rearing, 2012 to 2024. This was the threat. On the right, I placed a single sheet of paper, affidavit of voluntary non-involvement. This was the bait. And underneath my folder, hidden from view, I slid the copy of the living trust. This was the blade. I checked my watch. 1:58 in the afternoon. My hands were steady. My heart was slow. I wasn't the tired sister anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the one holding the pen. The elevator dinged in the hallway. Batya's heels clacked against the marble floor, fast and impatient. She was coming to collect her winnings. She had no idea she was about to sign away her life. Batya breezed into the room 2 minutes late, bringing a gust of expensive perfume and cold air with her. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge Mr. Henderson. She just pulled out a chair, sat down, and checked her watch with an exaggerated sigh. "Let's get this over with," she said, drumming her manicured fingernails on the mahogany. "I have a spa appointment at 3. Where do I sign for the house?" She looked at me then, her eyes sweeping over my scrubs I hadn't bothered to change after my shift with that familiar, dismissive sneer. To her, I was still just the help. I was the person who cleaned up the messes she made so she could keep her hands clean. She thought she had already won because, in her world, the loud person always beats the quiet one. I said nothing. I slid a thick ledger across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "An itemized record of every dollar spent raising your children for 12 years, I said. "Food, school, medical care. Inflation adjusted." She skimmed it until the final page. $300,000? "You're insane." "I have receipts," I replied. "And since you're claiming custody as the biological mother, you're legally responsible for half. $150,000. Pay today, or I countersue for back child support and negligence." The color drained from her face. She didn't have the money. "This is extortion," she stammered. "It's the cost of motherhood," I said. Her lawyer checked his watch. "I have another deposition in 10 minutes. If there's no settlement, we reschedule for next month." She panicked. She couldn't wait. I leaned back. "I'll waive the debt," I said, sliding over a single page. "If you sign this. An affidavit of voluntary non-involvement. 12 years. No care. No support. No contact." She saw freedom, not a trap. She signed without reading. "Done," she smirked. "Now give me the house." Her lawyer notarized the affidavit. Then I slid over the final document, the living trust. "Read page 4. She did. Slowly. "Assets go to the primary caregiver, the person who provided continuous physical care. I'm the mother," she said. "No," I replied. "You just swore you provided none." I pointed to the affidavit. "You didn't save $150,000. You forfeited a $450,000 house and a $200,000 trust." She lunged for the paper, screaming. Too late. It was logged. Final. Security escorted her out. That night, I came home to pizza, cartoons, and my kids asleep on the couch. I pinned the $200,000 cashier's check to the fridge beside their drawing. The debt was paid. The account was closed.